The sun beat down on the cobblestone street, harsh and unforgiving. I stood frozen, watching the taillights of our rental car grow smaller, then disappear around a corner. My husband's laughter and the laughter of his 3 college friends still rang in my ears, a cruel echo fading into the afternoon heat of this small Spanish town whose name I couldn't even pronounce correctly. You want independence. Fine, figure it out yourself, Elena. Gabrielle's final words before he slammed the car door. I remained rooted to the spot outside Café Mirador, my half-finished cortado still sitting on the table where we'd argued minutes before. My throat tightened as the reality sank in. They had actually driven away. Left me, in a foreign country, without my passport, without my credit cards, without my phone charger, with only 43 euros in my wallet. They would come back, surely. This was just Gabrielle teaching me a lesson, like when he'd locked me out of our apartment in Chicago last winter after I'd stayed too long at my sister's birthday dinner. I'd stood in the snow for 40 minutes before he relented. This was the same, just another one of his punishments, designed to remind me who was in control. But as 1 hour stretched into 2, then 3, the hollow pit in my stomach deepened. The cafe owner had begun giving me concerned looks. I'd ordered another coffee. I didn't want just to justify my continued presence at the table. "Está bien, señora?" he finally asked, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. I managed a weak smile. "Sí, gracias. Esperando a mi esposo." Waiting for my husband, one of the few Spanish phrases I knew. But Gabrielle wasn't coming back. Not today. The knowledge settled over me like a shroud as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the plaza. "Call someone," a voice in my head urged. But who? My phone showed no service. We were supposed to buy local SIM cards tomorrow. My sister was back in the States, too far away to help. Gabrielle's friends' wives. They were part of this punishment, silent witnesses to my humiliation. They'd never liked me anyway. I was always too sensitive, too needy, too much for their taste. When the cafe began closing at 9 p.m., I finally accepted my situation. I was alone in Santa Eulalia, a town 4 hours from Madrid, with no passport, almost no money, and no way to contact anyone. "Señora Ceramos." The cafe owner gestured to the door. They were closing. I stood on trembling legs, clutching my small handbag like a shield. "Hotel?" I asked desperately. "Cerca. Near." He pointed down a narrow street. "Pensión La Flora. Das Cals. 2 streets over." I thanked him and walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. Did he think I was crazy? Abandoned? Did he see what I was just beginning to understand, that I had been living inside a beautiful prison for the last 6 years? The Pensión La Flora was a modest establishment with peeling blue paint and a flickering sign. The woman at the desk eyed me suspiciously, a foreign woman alone, no luggage, arriving late. "Una habitación, por favor," I said, the phrase Gabrielle had taught me for hotel check-ins. Solo una noche. Just one night. Though where I would go tomorrow, I had no idea. "Passport?" she asked, in heavily accented English. "My esposo, my husband has it," I explained, feeling the humiliation burn my cheeks. "He will come tomorrow." She looked dubious, but seemed to sense my desperation. 40 euros. Cash only. My heart sank. Nearly all my money gone in an instant. I handed over the bills with shaking fingers. The room was tiny, with a narrow bed and a bathroom where the shower and toilet shared the same small space. But it was clean, and it had a lock on the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears to come. 6 years of marriage to Gabrielle Harmon. 6 years of walking on eggshells. 6 years of subtle put-downs and not-so-subtle control. 6 years of being told that my perceptions were wrong, my feelings were excessive, my needs were burdensome. When had it started? Not at the beginning. When we first met, Gabrielle had been charming, attentive, ambitious. The rising star of his architectural firm, with a dazzling smile and the ability to make me feel like the most fascinating woman in any room. My parents had loved him. My friends had envied me. By the time the criticism began, small jabs about my clothes, my cooking, my career choices as a freelance translator, I was already deeply in love, already planning our future. By the time he began checking my phone, questioning my whereabouts, suggesting I quit my job to focus on us, we were already married. And by the time I realized how isolated I'd become from friends, from family, from my own independence, it seemed too late. Our trip to Spain was supposed to be a fresh start. 3 weeks touring the country with his college friends and their wives. I'd been apprehensive. These were Gabrielle's people, not mine, but he'd insisted. "It'll be good for us," he'd said. "You need to get out more, be more social." What a joke that seemed now, as I sat alone in this sparse room in a town I'd never heard of until yesterday. The argument had started simply enough. At lunch, I'd expressed interest in taking a walking tour of the town while the others went wine tasting. Gabrielle had smiled tightly across the table, the smile that didn't reach his eyes, the one that warned me I was crossing a line. "Why would you want to do that?" he'd asked, his voice pleasant for the benefit of his friends. "We came here to spend time together. I just thought the historic district sounds interesting, and you know how wine gives me headaches. Elena has these funny little independent streaks," he told the table, drawing laughs. "She forgets we're supposed to be on our honeymoon phase. We've been married 6 years," I'd said quietly. Something in his eyes had hardened then. The rest of lunch was tense, and afterward, he'd pulled me aside outside the cafe. "What are you trying to prove?" he'd hissed, making me look bad in front of everyone. I just wanted. You just wanted attention. Like always. God, Elena, do you have any idea how exhausting you are? How sick I am of your constant neediness, and then these bizarre moments of defiance. The words had hit like physical blows. "I'm not defiant. I just wanted to see the town." "Fine, see the town. In fact, why don't you figure everything out yourself since you're so independent now?" He'd turned to his friends, who were watching with uncomfortable smirks. "I think Elena needs a lesson in what real independence feels like, don't you?" And then they were getting into the car, and I was standing there, not quite believing what was happening until it was too late and they were gone. Now, in the silent room, I curled into a ball on the unfamiliar bed. For the first time, I allowed myself to name what my marriage had become: emotional abuse. The word I'd refused to apply to my situation, because abuse happened to other women, weaker women, not to educated, middle-class women with loving families. Not to me. But as I lay there, memories flooded back with new clarity. The time Gabrielle had accidentally deleted an important work email from a potential client because you've been working too much. The time he'd invited my entire family for Christmas dinner without telling me until the morning of, then criticized my subpar cooking in front of everyone. The time he'd insisted we move to a new apartment when I'd made friends with our neighbor, claiming the building had electrical issues. I had explained away each incident, made excuses, blamed myself. But now, abandoned in a foreign country, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a fitful sleep still wearing my clothes, my tears drying on my cheeks. I woke to sunlight streaming through thin curtains and the momentary confusion of unfamiliar surroundings. For one blessed second, I forgot everything. Then reality crashed back, heavy and suffocating. I checked my phone, still no service, battery at 42%. No messages, no missed calls. They hadn't come back. A new emotion began to stir beneath the fear and confusion. Anger. White-hot, clarifying anger. How dare he? How dare they all? What kind of person abandons their spouse in a foreign country as a lesson? I splashed water on my face in the tiny bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes were puffy from crying, my dark hair a tangled mess. But underneath the distress, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: determination. I had €3 and a few coins left. My passport was in Gabrielle's possession. My return flight to Chicago wasn't for another 17 days. I had no one to call, nowhere to go. But I was not going to be waiting at this hotel when Gabrielle decided his lesson was over. I would not give him the satisfaction. With sudden clarity, I remembered something my grandmother had told me years ago before she died. A woman should always have "fuck you money, Elena." Enough to walk away, no questions asked. I'd laughed then, thinking her old-fashioned. Gabrielle and I shared everything: our finances, our decisions, our lives. Except we didn't, did I? He controlled our joint account. He kept my passport safe during trips. He managed our investments, our major purchases, our social calendar. I'd let this happen, but I could damn well make sure it never happened again. First, I needed money. Then documents. Then a plan. The pension owner eyed me warily when I approached the front desk. "My husband is delayed," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. "I need work to pay for my room. Trabajo. I can clean." She seemed surprised, then thoughtful. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "My sister's restaurant. She needs help. You can wash dishes." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. Gracias." She introduced herself as Marisol and walked me to a small restaurant 3 streets away, speaking rapidly in Spanish I couldn't follow. Her sister, Claudia, was a stern-looking woman who assessed me with sharp eyes. 4 hours. €10, she said in broken English. And lunch. It wasn't much, but it was something. I spent that morning scrubbing pots and plates until my hands were raw, grateful for the mindless work that kept darker thoughts at bay. The kitchen staff spoke little English, but they shared their simple lunch with me: a potato tortilla and crusty bread, with kind smiles and curious glances. By afternoon, I had earned enough to stay another night at the pension and had a promise of more work the next day. Small victories, but they felt enormous. At a small shop, I purchased a notebook and pen, then sat in the town square, formulating a plan. I needed to contact the American embassy to report my passport stolen, which it essentially was. I needed to access money somehow, and I needed to decide what came next. Because one thing had become absolutely clear in the harsh light of day. I was not going back to Gabrielle. 3 days passed in this manner. Work, plan, sleep, repeat. My phone battery had long since died, and I hadn't seen or heard from Gabrielle. Part of me was terrified. What if something had happened to him? The rest of me knew better. This was punishment, and he was waiting for me to break. On the 4th day, everything changed. While clearing tables at the restaurant, where I now worked lunch and dinner shifts, I overheard American Voices tourists discussing their travel plans. The ferry to Barcelona leaves at 6, a woman was saying. Then we have 3 days there before heading to Greece. Greece! The word triggered something in me, a memory of a dream deferred. Years ago, before Gabrielle, I'd planned a solo trip to the Greek islands. I'd saved for it, researched it obsessively. It was going to be my graduation gift to myself. Then I met Gabrielle, and somehow the trip never happened. The money went toward our first apartment instead. With trembling hands, I approached their table. "Excuse me," I said, my voice rusty from disuse. "Did you say there's a ferry to Barcelona?" They were kind, this middle-aged couple from Boston. When I explained I was trying to reach the American embassy after being separated from my traveling companion, they offered specifics: the ferry terminal location, the schedule, the approximate cost. €22. More than I had, but close to what I'd make today. That night, I couldn't sleep. A plan was forming, reckless, perhaps, but also thrilling. Get to Barcelona, go to the embassy, report my passport stolen, and then not home, not back to Chicago, but forward to Greece, to the dream I'd abandoned. Was it possible? With no passport, little money, and no connections? I didn't know, but for the first time in years, I felt truly awake, truly present in my own life. The next morning, I withdrew my meager savings from Marisol and explained I was leaving. To my surprise, she pressed a small package into my hands: a sandwich, an apple, and €15. "Be careful," she said, in careful English. "Men who leave women alone no good." Her unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Gracias," I whispered. "For everything." Claudia from the restaurant added another €20 to my funds. "You work hard," she said simply. "Buena suerte." With these small kindnesses and my own earnings, I had just enough for the ferry ticket and a few days of bare survival in Barcelona. It would have to be enough. The ferry journey passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I kept expecting Gabrielle to appear at any moment to drag me back into our toxic dance. But as the Spanish coastline receded and the vast Mediterranean stretched before me, something inside me began to unfurl a cautious hope, a newfound determination. Barcelona was overwhelming after the small town noisy, bustling, intimidating. I found the American consulate easily enough but discovered a new obstacle. They required a police report to issue an emergency passport plus proof of identity. I had my driver's license, thankfully in my wallet when Gabrielle left, but no police report. At the local police station, my rudimentary Spanish failed me completely. Frustration and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me until a young officer approached who spoke English. "You say your husband took your passport?" he asked, his expression serious. "Yes," I admitted. We argued. He left with it. "This is a crime," he said simply. "Theft of documents. Control." The word hit me like a thunderbolt. Control. Yes, that's what it had always been about. With the officer's help, I filed a report, names and details laid bare in official documentation. Gabrielle Harmon had stolen my passport. Gabrielle Harmon had abandoned me in a foreign country. Seeing it in black and white, in a formal document, made it impossible to minimize any longer. Armed with the police report, I returned to the consulate. The process was still complicated. They needed to verify my identity, contact someone who could confirm who I was. With profound humiliation, I realized the only person I could call was my sister, Madeline. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since Gabrielle had accused her of interfering in our marriage when she'd expressed concern about my increasing isolation. The consulate allowed me to use their phone. "Elena," her voice when she answered was shocked. "Where are you? Gabrielle called 2 days ago saying you'd run off during your trip, that everyone was looking for you." The audacity of his lie stole my breath. "Maddie," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm at the American consulate in Barcelona. Gabrielle abandoned me in a town called Santa Eulalia 4 days ago." He took my passport, my credit cards, everything. He drove away, laughing with his friends. The silence on the other end stretched for seconds that felt like hours. "I'm booking a flight right now," she finally said, her voice tight with fury. "Tell me what you need." For the first time since this nightmare began, I broke down completely, sobbing into the consulate phone while a sympathetic staff member patted my shoulder. "Don't," I managed between sobs. "Don't come, but I need you to confirm my identity. And I need to borrow some money." "Elena, I'm not coming home," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "Not yet. I need time to figure out who I am without him." Another long pause. "Then, where will you go?" "Greece," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm going to Greece." 3 days later, with an emergency passport, access to funds wired by Madeline, and a small backpack of second-hand clothes purchased from a charity shop, I boarded a ferry bound for Athens. Gabrielle had called the consulate twice, demanding information about me. They had confirmed only that I was safe and had chosen not to disclose my whereabouts. His text messages, once I had a working phone again, alternated between rage and honeyed apologies. "Where the fuck are you? Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Baby, I'm so sorry. We came back the next morning, but you were gone. Why did you run? We were just teaching you a little lesson. This is ridiculous, Elena. Your behavior is completely unacceptable. Come back now. I miss you. I love you. We can work through this. Please call me." Each message reinforced my decision. The lesson he'd intended to teach me had worked, just not in the way he'd planned. I'd learned that I could survive without him, that I was stronger than I knew, that I deserved better. I blocked his number as the Greek coastline came into view. Athens welcomed me with blinding sunlight and ancient stones. I found a small, affordable room in a neighborhood away from the tourist centers and began to build a routine. Wake early, walk the city, practice Greek phrases, look for work. The loneliness was crushing at times. Who was I without Gabrielle defining me? What did I want? What did I enjoy? These questions haunted my solitary meals, my silent evenings. But gradually, day by day, I began to remember. I had once loved photography. Gabrielle had called it a waste of time. I started taking pictures with my new cheap phone, capturing light on marble ruins, faces in marketplaces. I had once been passionate about languages. Gabrielle had discouraged my freelance translation work as unstable. I found a language exchange meetup where I offered English in return for Greek lessons. Small seeds of a new life planted in foreign soil. 2 weeks after arriving in Athens, I found work at a small hotel near the Plaka district. The owner, Sophia, needed someone who spoke English to help with foreign tourists. The pay was minimal, but it included a tiny room on the top floor with a view of distant rooftops and a sliver of sea. "You are running from something," Sophia observed on my 3rd day, her keen eyes missing nothing. "Or someone." I hesitated, then nodded. "My husband." She didn't press for details, just squeezed my shoulder. "Then you need to run towards something now, not just away. Find your passion again." Her words stayed with me as I settled into Greek life. I began translating tourist brochures from Greek to English for local businesses. I started a blog documenting my journey, careful to reveal no identifying details, but pouring out my experiences of breaking free from emotional abuse. To my surprise, other women responded, sharing their own stories. 1 month turned into 2. Summer heat gave way to autumn breezes. My emergency passport was replaced with a proper one via the embassy. Madeline and I spoke weekly on video calls. I sent the first installment, repaying the money she'd loaned me. "He's furious," she told me during one call. "He came to my house, demanding to know where you are. I told him I didn't know exactly which is true, and that you were safe and wanted no contact. He didn't take it well." "Are you okay?" I asked, worried. "Better than okay." I filed a police report when he refused to leave. "He won't be back." She studied me through the screen. "You look different. Stronger." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm becoming myself again. Or maybe for the first time." I was. Each day without Gabrielle's criticism, without his subtle manipulation, I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, trusted my own perceptions. The woman who had stood frozen on a Spanish street, watching her husband drive away, felt like a stranger now. I thought I had escaped completely, built my fragile new beginning successfully. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. It was an ordinary Tuesday when my carefully constructed new world collided with what I'd left behind. I was working the hotel reception desk when a familiar voice froze the blood in my veins. "I'm looking for my wife." Gabrielle stood before me, impeccably dressed in the linen suit I'd helped him select before our trip, his dark hair styled perfectly, his handsome face set in the concerned expression he wore so well for others. To anyone watching, he would appear the devoted husband, desperately searching for his troubled wife. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "How did you find me?" "Your blog," he said simply. "You were always careless with details. The view from your window, the description of the hotel, the neighborhood. It wasn't difficult." Of course, my writing the outlet that had helped me heal had led him straight to me. "You need to come home, Elena," he said, his voice gentle but his eyes hard. "This little adventure has gone on long enough. You've made your point." "My point," I repeated, disbelief making my voice shake. "You abandoned me in a foreign country. You took my passport, my money, everything." "That wasn't a fight, Gabrielle. It was abuse." He flinched at the word, glancing around to see if anyone had heard. "You're being dramatic. It was a stupid prank that went too far. I came back for you the next morning, after leaving me alone overnight in a town where I didn't speak the language, with no way to get help if I needed it," I said, my voice growing stronger. "That's not a prank. That's cruelty. I've apologized. What more do you want?" Irritation crept into his tone. "You've had your little independence tour. It's time to be an adult and come home. I've booked us flights for tomorrow." The old Elena would have crumbled under that authoritative tone, those dismissive words. Would have doubted herself, questioned her perceptions, agreed that she was overreacting. But I wasn't that Elena anymore. "No," I said clearly. He blinked, genuinely surprised. "What do you mean, no? I'm not coming with you. Not tomorrow. Not ever." His expression darkened, the mask of concerned husband slipping. "Don't be ridiculous. What are you going to do? Live in this dump forever? Work as a hotel clerk? This isn't you, Elena." "That's where you're wrong," I said calmly. "This is exactly me. The real me. The me that existed before you convinced me I was too much, too needy, too emotional, too everything. The me that had dreams and opinions you systematically crushed. I gave you everything," he hissed, leaning across the desk. "A beautiful home, financial security, status, and this is how you repay me, by running away like a child." I laughed then, a genuine laugh that seemed to startle us both. "You didn't give me anything, Gabrielle. You took my confidence, my independence, my voice. And when you left me on that street in Spain, you thought you were taking the last thing I had, my security. But you actually gave me something precious, freedom." He stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time since I'd known him. "I've filed for divorce," I continued, the words I'd rehearsed but never thought I'd actually have the courage to say. "The papers are being delivered to your house next week. I don't want anything from you except to be left alone. You'll never survive without me," he said quietly, dangerously. "You'll come crawling back when this fantasy falls apart." Sophia appeared beside me then, alerted by a coworker to the tense confrontation. "Is there a problem?" she asked in her heavily accented English. "This man was just leaving," I said firmly. "He doesn't have a reservation." Gabrielle's eyes darted between us, calculating. Whatever he saw in my expression must have convinced him this battle was lost. "This isn't over," he said softly. "When you come to your senses, I might not be waiting." "Good," I replied. "Don't wait. Move on." "I have." After he left, my knees finally gave way, and I sank onto the stool behind the desk. Sophia pressed a glass of water into my hands. "Husband?" she asked. I nodded. "Ex-husband," she corrected firmly. "You did well." Had I? My hands trembled, my heart raced, and part of me, a small, conditioned part, whispered that I'd made a terrible mistake. Gabrielle was right. Who was I to think I could build a life from nothing? But another voice, stronger and clearer, reminded me of all I'd already accomplished. I had survived being abandoned, found work in 2 different countries, made new friends, created a new life. None of it was glamorous or perfect, but all of it was mine. That night, I climbed to the hotel's rooftop with my notebook and wrote by the light of my phone. I wrote about fear and freedom, about loss and discovery, about how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing that ever happened to you if you're brave enough to learn from it. Gabrielle didn't return the next day or the one after. Whether it was my resolve that deterred him or the fact that Sophia had reported him to local police, I couldn't say. But gradually, the knot of anxiety in my chest began to loosen. 6 months after being abandoned on a Spanish street, I stood on the deck of a small boat headed to Hydra, one of the Greek islands I'd dreamed of visiting all those years ago. My camera, a real one now, purchased with carefully saved earnings, hung around my neck. My blog had grown popular enough to generate modest income through affiliate links to travel resources. A small publisher in Athens had expressed interest in a memoir about my journey. The wind whipped my hair, longer now and lightened by the Mediterranean sun. I had changed in ways, both visible and invisible. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach, so familiar I hadn't even recognized it as abnormal, was gone. I slept through the night, I made decisions without second-guessing myself. There were still hard days, of course. Days when loneliness cut deep. When I missed the good parts of my old life, the stability and familiarity. Days when I questioned everything. But even on those days, I never regretted my choice. Because it had been my choice, perhaps the first truly independent decision I'd made in years. As the boat approached the island, I thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought me here. If Gabrielle hadn't abandoned me that day, would I ever have found the courage to leave? Would I have continued making excuses, minimizing his behavior, blaming myself? Probably. It had taken the extreme cruelty of being left stranded to finally show me what I'd known deep down all along, that I deserved better. My phone buzzed with a text from Madeline, court date set for divorce. You don't need to be there. Lawyer says everything's on track. Another step toward closing that chapter of my life. I texted back a quick thanks, then put the phone away and lifted my camera instead, focusing on the whitewashed buildings climbing the hillside before me. The future stretched out, uncertain but full of possibility. Not perfect, not easy, but mine to shape. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what came next.